Hello, Kudzai.
Hello, Larry.
This is, um, this is Larry Secular, and I am interviewing Kudzai Mangombe, who is a
Yeah.
student at the Liverpool Institute for the Performing Arts, which is an acting school in Liverpool, England. And Kudzai is a friend of my niece, who is also a student at that school.
Mhm.
And the purpose of today's interview is to get Kudzai's thoughts on what's happening in the world. But before we do that, Kudzai, could you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, I'm Kudzai. Thank you for getting my name right. I'm 20 years old. I am currently going into my third year at Liverpool Institution of Performing Arts, also known as LIPA because that's a long name. I live in Manchester. I was born in Zimbabwe and then I came to the UK when I was 5. Um, I say when I was 4. No, I think my mum says when I was 5. I say when I was 4. So it's a bit debatable. Who knows? And I just grew up my whole life basically in the UK, and my whole experience is the UK. I compared to like my more African cousins, I don't really. Our experiences are so different, but yeah, just grew up in the UK, born in Zim, raised in the UK.
How did your mother come to move to the UK?
My dad was here, and then they were married, so we just followed later on. Yeah.
You had siblings as well?
Yes, I have a brother who's 9 years old.
Oh, brother who's
My
not.
mother is a social worker.
All right, so the thesis of this is to ask you what you think is happening in the world around us. This is a very disruptive time. It's scary in many ways. So if you've had some time to think about this, what do you think?
When I was thinking about this question, it made me kind of think. When I think of the word scary and disruptive, I kind of thought it was kind of like a dead end way of seeing what's happening, in the sense of, is it just scary and just disruptive? Like, I know for some people, especially with what's happened with COVID, and people have lost loved ones and they're not going to be able to continue life with them. That is very scary, and that is very sad, and that is a disruption, especially if you've lost someone you thought you had years with, and unfortunately COVID just kind of took that person out. That's very destructive and very sad. But I think for me, when I'm thinking about the way that I view the world, and also like younger people that I'm friends with, I haven't heard many people say that it's scary for them. I think I've heard more people say it's been challenging, it's been a personal kind of reevaluation, and they've had the time to grow in terms of who they are, and they've had time to kind of review the world in a really weird but beautiful way. And I think for me, I haven't really thought this is a scary time. I think especially with the issues that have kind of been brought to attention, and I think it's more issues that, I don't think that these are new issues. I think these are issues that have been going on for years. I think you can look back throughout history, these are issues that are just continuous. And I think for me, it's not new. I've had loads of friends being like, oh, I didn't know, or oh, this is so new. And I'm like, for me, I'm like, these are issues that have been here. And I think once again, it comes back to perspective in terms of how you've been raised, and how you view the world, and what you've been taught to focus on and not focus on. And for me, my mum doesn't really necessarily teach me to kind of limit myself. And I think in this season that we're in, which is very, I think it's more challenging and uncertain and destructive. Yes, I think it is, but in a good way. I think it's caused people to kind of ruffle their feathers in a way that's causing them to challenge themselves, think outside the box. And also thinking about businesses and corporations and things like Zoom, which has probably been there for years, but all of a sudden Zoom's probably making a lot of money. So for something like Zoom, this isn't a scary time, it's a really profitable time. So I think you just got to think about how you see it. And I think for me, I can't necessarily say it's scary. I think it's more challenging, and it's very uncertain, but it's also very exciting, because now loads of things have changed, and they could be changing for the better. And since I want to do screen acting, it's probably going to benefit someone like me in the future, because we're now focusing more on screen, and we're now doing things more online. But I think for businesses that are, or for people who do more one-to-one contact, it's kind of up in the air still. And I think with the issues, that have been taking place, I think COVID did something that has never happened before, which is cause everybody to be in the same place at the same time, which is it's a global lockdown. So everybody was in the same state. So these issues that have been happening in the background, you know, kind of came to they did come to the forefront. And COVID allowed that to happen. So everybody was active and on their phones and on the news, and, you know, whether it was to check about the latest COVID guidelines or whether it was just to check the news, things that have always been apparent all of a sudden became, you know, the focus point, but they were always there. And I think if you look at different types of jobs, especially key workers, something that happened like recently, you know, that's caused, you know, awareness in terms of race, you know, this whole racism conversation, something like that has been happening throughout, but because, you know, we're all stuck now in the same state, everybody's aware of it. There are issues that have been happening for years, but now everybody's aware. And I think COVID did something that I don't think would have been done if it wasn't for COVID. So it's weird because you can look at it and be like, there's some positives in the sense of it's brought global awareness, and obviously there's huge negatives because it's caused so many people to have. And so recently I've been paying more attention to trafficking, you know, child trafficking and stuff that's taking place with children. And that's something that I've always known about. But for some random reason now I have more time. Well, not for some random reason, but now I have more time to really focus on it and really do research. And I also think in terms of personal growth, I think, you know, looking inward and looking at self and like health as well, like your mental health and your physical health. I think, you know, with COVID, a lot of people, there was a huge rise in terms of more people exercising, people paying more attention to their mental health, and, you know, not being in contact with people, not having your daily routine and things just kind of making you busy, and you've had time to stop. You're like, oh, actually, mentally, am I okay? And, you know, you've got to now think about what is it that I've been doing that has made me think I'm okay. And I've had loads of conversations, especially with younger people, because, you know, we are more, there's that sense of you don't want to experience FOMO. So the fear of missing out, you don't want that. And now that everybody's missing out, I think FOMO was amplified even more because somehow, some which way, social media made you think you had to be doing stuff because everybody else was doing stuff. I remember at the very beginning, there was posts that people said, if you don't come out of COVID, of lockdown, without a new trick, then you failed. And it's like, why do I have to learn something? Like, why is there this pressure to have to do something? And I think it's because everybody wants to feel important. Everybody wants to come out being like, look at me, I did this, I did that, rather than actually let me take a moment to just look at myself and see where I'm at versus where I want to be and how I can get there, and how this stage can help me make changes for the better and get rid of the things that were the worst.
Tell me a little bit about the child trafficking.
Yes, I've done so much research. One of them was there was an issue that took place on social media, and social media has for some random reason taken things down, and I was a bit like, why is this taking place? And I did more research and it found out because they want to fact check and make sure that what you're sharing is correct. But I'm thinking there are other things that people share that nobody gets fact checked on it, and it could be serious stuff, you know, like people making accusations and you never hear anyone saying fact check this. And I think when I started looking into the sex trafficking and the child trafficking, I started to realize it's because there's so many like people who are in high places or things that, you know, especially high places like the corporations and like the law and the government and politics and all that were involved. And it's kind of like, if we bring attention to this, that means now we have to hold people accountable, and we now have to start asking questions that people may not be comfortable to want to answer, or questions that nobody's ever thought about. And I think it's also kind of getting rid of this idea that everything's perfect, and I think with something like that, it's incredibly sad. And when you look into it, it does put a downer on your day. And I think that's maybe the reason why it's not something that's at the forefront, because I think people feel like it's another thing that I have to bring awareness to. It's another thing I have to talk about. It's another thing I have to feel like I have to do my bit. And I think some people just don't want to do that. And when you do your research, you realize this is an issue that is, it's like a global pandemic. It's happening around the world. It's something that takes place everywhere. There is no country in the world that doesn't experience children or women being taken, or even men being taken. And you see movies talk about it, and you watch these movies, and I think there's that sense of disconnect because you're watching on a movie screen. So it's like you're aware it happens, but it's enough. Like, I've watched 2 hours of it. There's a man that was the hero. It's a good day, until you start researching and doing your homework and realizing, oh no, it goes deeper than what I thought it was. It's longer than just 2 hours of a film, and it's more than just the film Taken. It's more than that. And I think that's something that I've also just taken the time to look into and think, okay, moving forward, wherever I get to in life or whatever it is I want to do, I want to make sure that I do find a way to help. And it may not be, creating my own charity, but it can be simply just raising awareness on social media, or talking about it, or doing more to make myself more aware than I was before, but also not making myself feel guilty for not being at the front line. And I think that's something like trafficking that people probably push at the back of their minds, because it's like, I know I should be doing more. And when you can't, or you don't know how to, you'd want to push it to the back of your mind so you don't feel like a bad person.
So talk a little more, if you're to the degree that you're able, about the link between these institutions, companies, governments, or whatever, and child trafficking. Is it active participation? Is it sort of acquiescence to bad things because there are other economic interests? What is it that links this power to the persistence of this evil?
I think it's that sense of control, isn't it? I think it's that sense of wanting more and wanting to be at the top. And for some random reason, I had a conversation with a friend, and I was like, why is it when people get to a level of power, or they experience a level of wealth, it's kind of like, for some random reason, they just go the wrong direction. And my friend said sometimes it's that sense of never being satisfied, never feeling like it's enough. And you've got to think to yourself, okay, so what is it that you know that you will achieve, or you want to do or work towards, that will make you feel like is enough? And for some, I think organizations and corporations, or people and individuals, it's that sense of, I will never feel like I'm enough, or it's enough, until I have control, until I have a grips. And I think sometimes, people committing evil acts or doing something bad, it's that lack of self inward. It's that lack of contentment within that causes you to unfortunately create external damages to others, being children. And I think, when you look at trafficking, children tend to be the target, because there is that sense of control and power and authority. So you've got to, I think with this type of stuff, you've got to look at how can we ensure that authority, control, and power doesn't get abused to the point that it starts to neglect or misuse others, being children, which tends to be the main audience, that the target audience for something like trafficking. So I think when you look at something like that, for me, I do tend to think that individual, or that organization, or that person, or whatever it is that's driving that, is lacking something within. For me, I always think that has to be a really sad, sick, or twisted individual that is lacking a genuine sense of joy, purpose, or something in their life, so they take it out on someone else or other things.
Well, that's kind of the argument you've made is kind of a very good broad critique of rampant capitalism in all of its forms, of which child trafficking is perhaps the worst manifestation, but not the only bad manifestation.
Yeah, it's really sad. When you do your research, you realize, wow, there's a lot that we don't know about. There's a lot of back doors that people are finding, and people know about, and people share about, that the rest of us don't know exist, right, that are really bad.
So you've been finding stories about this stuff online and reading it, is that it?
Yes, I've come across loads of videos on Facebook of parents sharing simple things like their children's toys. If you dip them in water, the children's toys start to reveal lingerie. you know, and it's like, that's a child's toy. Who's doing that? Who's covering that up? And you know, the more that I do the research, sometimes I have to take a break because I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do anything anymore. But the more that you do it, the more that you find, you also start to find that there are stories of people who do suffer extreme consequences for simply just talking about it. They get shut down, you know, people's pages are getting shut down. And I remember looking at Facebook, there was the hashtag save the children at some point was blocked. Simple hashtag save the children, you couldn't share it. And for me, I'm like, why are we now blocking hashtag save the children? Oh, because it's bringing awareness, something that is of a global scale, and you know, you don't know who's behind it. And I think the more I do my research, the more I'm starting to find out that not everything is roses and daisies as much as I thought it was. Simple things like toys, you know. I'm like, I want to make my own children's toys in the future. Come on.
So how about, let's talk a little bit about racism,
Mm-hmm.
and your general view of it and your personal view of it, since you're Black. Is that the correct terminology?
Yes, that's
Okay.
yeah.
In England, because a lot of the viewers will be Americans. And why don't you tell me about how you view that in general and how that you have viewed that in your life?
It's really interesting for me because I was thinking about it in the like just throughout lockdown because of what's been happening, and I think about like the way I grew up. I never heard my mum ever tell me that I couldn't because of my race, or she never told me, you know, you're gonna have to work harder because you're Black. I never heard that. If anything, I just heard my mum saying, if you don't put the work in, you're gonna be behind, and all your friends are gonna go to college, and you're still in high school. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't want to be behind. But I never heard my mum associate race with anything, and I'm very grateful for that because I grew up without thinking that my race is a factor. I never thought that, you know, because I'm Black, it's an issue. If anything, I grew up thinking, oh, because I'm a woman, because the world tells us that women have it harder, that's going to be my issue, rather than because I'm a Black woman. I never thought that. My mom never made me believe that or think that way. And I think it's also because her parents never did that with her as well. So I think that is something that I would want to pass down to my children, just to teach them that, you know, you can do it based on the character and based on your character. And it reminds me of Martin Luther King. You know, you don't want to judge the people on the race, but the content of their character, on who they are inside. What do they bring to the table, if they bring anything to the table, that is. So for me, when it comes to racism, I never really grew up thinking my race was a factor up until I was in college. And that's when I really experienced colorism more than I experienced racism. So for me, colorism is, do I explain it or do people know? I hope.
Explain it. We don't understand colorism.
Okay, so colorism is, well, for how I see it, is within a community, you have now kind of this comparison of who's better and who's worse based on how light or dark they are, or what their features are, or just simply based on the way that they look within that community. So if we're all Black, now we're going to compare what is the better Black, or what is the lighter Black, and if that's better or worse. So, you know, when I think about primary school, high school, I never really experienced any issues with racism. Nobody ever, the only one time that I experienced was when somebody called me the N-word. And when they did say it, it was so immature of them to say it. Even when I asked them, why did you say it? They had no reason to say it. So you kind of realize, oh, you know, when you're in high school or primary school, nobody really knows what they're saying to you. Nobody really knows what it is that they're doing. You know, you're just saying it because you've heard it and you know, oh, that's going to be an offensive word, so let me say it. But if you ask them, why did you say that? They have nothing really to say. Up until maybe
trying it out.
Yeah, literally, you just see. Yeah, you're literally seeing, is this okay? Okay, it's not okay, but why isn't it okay? And if you don't really tell them why it's not okay, to them they think it's okay. And that's one thing I've learned, that, you know, growing up, I've had to, not as much as I think I've had, but I've had to kind of tell people why this isn't okay or why that is wrong. But I haven't really come in contact with racism at its extreme, like, point for me. And every Black person's story will be different. That's one thing that I'm also realizing, that for some random reason, Black people are kind of grouped, and it's as if the world has this like monolithic view of us, that we are all one. But if you take the time to really get in there, you see that people have different stories and different ways of thinking and believing, and we just all happen to be Black, but we're still individuals. So for me, colorism was really where I was at, and that was in college. I was my first time having a group of Black people in my life, and I've never had that before. So I went to primary school and high school I went to dominantly white schools, and I went to a private primary school, and I didn't experience racism there as well. For me, it was work hard, be the top of the class, and that's it. But college, that's when I really realized, oh, I'm Black. Oh, things happen to us because we're Black. You know, I had Black people tell me what it's like to be Black versus what my experience had been. And then because of that, it kind of influenced the way that I started to see myself. And I realized that I was being treated a little bit differently from everybody else, unfortunately. And, you know, when you look back at it, it's a simple case of, unfortunately, it was a bit of colorism. And I think it also happened without anyone realizing that this is what colorism is. I think you know, at that time, people were treating me differently or not necessarily liking me, but saying it's about something else, but really it's just colorism. And it takes itself, the form of colorism doesn't look like colorism. It doesn't look like the way it did in the beginning, which is you have the darker people in the field and the lighter people in the house. It's shifted. So because it's shifted now, you don't realize it's colorism until you're out of it, and you're like, oh, that was a case of colorism. And
are you looking back now at your childhood and your years in school and reinterpreting some events as having been influenced by colorism, whereas you did not realize that at the time?
Yeah, especially college, because I know high school and primary school, never have I experienced racism or colorism apart from that one. College is where you go when you turn 16 up until the age of 18. It's that point before university.
I see. So that's called later high school for us.
Oh, okay. Your system's
totally different. So I just want to clarify it for myself and for the listeners. What I'm understanding is that when you went to college in Manchester, you're grouping together into a larger school with a lot more different types of students from different parts of the city.
You could go from any high school, everyone, as long as you want to go to that college, you can get in, you get the grades, and you're in. So I'm meeting Black people who have a different life than me, who've gone to different high schools and primary schools as me. They've experienced the world differently from me. So yeah. So I grew up like learning that, you know, to have a dialogue with someone, and if you have an issue with someone, you simply talk it out and you get to the root of the issue, whereas other people learn, you know, you fight about it, or you go to meet me outside, or come outside after school and let's fight.
But you're your mother's daughter.
Yeah.
You're a social worker's child, so of course you were raised in the art of discourse to resolve issues, not in physical fighting.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, that also, and just thinking about, like, you know, going to church and learning that, you know, you love your neighbor and you turn the other cheek, and you simply bless where others curse. So I had that growing up, and obviously they might have had that growing up too, but I think, you know, with schools, that influences how you behave. And I went to a much more stricter school in the sense of there was no room for violence, and if there was, you know, you would be in a lot of trouble. You don't want that. Like, I remember high school, everybody felt important when they had like the prefect position or the head girl, or you joined the sports club. That's where you were, like, that's where you felt your worth. Whereas there's other schools that promote more, you know, being popular means being the cool kid, which means bullying other people, beating other people. So you have different schools that hold different standards, and I think I just went to one of those schools that held a different standard from the other people that I had met in college, and that's when we kind of clashed, because we had these different approaches to life and different viewings of life. And I was like probably like an odd duck in the sense of, why don't you fight? Like, why aren't you fighting? And it's like, I just don't see the value in that, because I beat you up, but then what changes? You're still going to think the same way. But if I can sit down with you and have a dialogue with you and maybe debate you, you know, if it has to be that, then by the end, we might actually be on the same page, or in the middle. We meet each other in the middle. So I just had a different outlet of life. And I think that clashed with the other people's way of life as well. But when I do look back, I think some of the things were influenced because of colorism, and unfortunately, just yeah, sometimes it's one of those things. It is what it is, and you look back and you go, "Oh, that's a case. Got it. Now I know what it could look like versus what I thought it looked like." Because I always knew colorism was when people tell you to your face, "I prefer light-skinned girls over darker girls." Which is, that's the media way of doing it. We promote the lighter skinned girls over the darker skinned girls, rather than, no, some people may just pick on you, bully you, or just dislike you because you just happen to be a bit lighter than them, but you don't realize it until you're in it. So for me, when it comes to racism, I think sometimes, I think your perspective and how you see things and how you're taught influences how you're treated, or how you think others will treat you. Because I think if I was maybe grew up knowing that my race was going to be something that people saw straight away, the way that I looked or viewed people probably would have changed. I would have just automatically become defensive, thinking I have to prove myself 10 times because I'm also Black. Whereas I think because of college, that was my attitude in university. So my attitude from high school, primary school to college was different from my attitude from college to uni. University, I was very defensive. I just naturally assumed people were going to treat me differently because of my race. People were going to look at me differently because of my race. And because of that, I had a wall up. And I look back now and I do see how defensive I was, and how kind of brash I was, and really quick to just kind of block people. And then later on, once I became comfortable with people, the wall came crumbling down. And then once again, now my perspective has shifted again. So now I don't really, once again, view my race as the deciding factor. I see it as an addition. At least you've got a Black girl on the team. I don't see it as we have just a Black girl. You also happen to have a girl who happens to be Black. That's what I see, these things that the world tells you, that people will treat you differently because you're a female or because you're Black. I think I see it more as, well, I hope people treat me the way that I treat them. I hope people treat me based on my character. And if it happens that they treat me differently because I'm a girl or because I'm Black, well, then we'll talk about that and we'll discuss why that happens, because I don't think it needs to happen. I think it's all about your character, and if you add value to the team, because if you don't, we're going to have to replace you. Like, we need to add value to everything, whether you're Black, pink, blue, purple, white, a male or female. I think at the end of the day, it's what you carry, and if you have anything to carry.
So now that that was wonderfully said, by the way.
Thank you.
Really great. Now that you're launching yourself into an acting career, how do you view your Blackness in the context of being in the context of film and theater and the industry you're going into? How do you think that will either aid you or the opposite, hold you back, or do you view it as, in many cases, neutral?
In the beginning, which is, I just look back at like younger Kudzai, and I'm just so thankful for her. I always said to myself, and I remember looking in my notebook of like things that I want to achieve, and one of the things was, I want to change the way that people are casted. If you have a role, if it's a female role who happens to be 16, I think that's enough. I think you don't need to say, and she needs to be white, or she has to. I think we need to, if we're trying to move forward and get rid of, identity politics, I think we need to get rid of the identity. I think we need to stop looking for specific ways. I think stop trying to box the way that the role should look. If you want to involve more people, you've got to open it up. And sometimes opening it up means getting rid of things that close it. And for me, when I think about my career, I definitely want to move towards just going up for any role, whether it's a romantic role, a funny role, a tough role, whatever it is, as long as I'm interested in it. And I think I do want to challenge the casting, in the sense of, if my agent finds a role that happens to be for a white female, I want to go up for it. I want to do that, because if I can fit that character, if I can fit that mold, and if I can do the job, I should be given the chance to prove that I can. Now, it's different if it's like a biopic, because that's a true story. That's somebody's story who looked that specific way. You need to do the job right. But if it's a if it's a fiction, if it's just a made up role, if it's just a story you want to tell that is applied to anybody, I don't know why you have to limit it. I've never understood that. And I've never understood typecasting either. And that's something that I keep hearing, you know, preparing for third year, you know, what type of typecast do you want to be? I don't want to be typecasted. I don't want to be limited. I want to show myself that I can do it if I can do it, but I need to be given the chance to do it.
That's very good. It's really good. You're making some very strong statements. Now I'm going to challenge you a little bit.
Okay.
I watch a lot of Netflix and Amazon Prime films, and many of those films in English language are English historical dramas, English historical series, many of which are amazingly good from an amateur point of view. They're beautifully acted, they're beautifully scripted, they're beautifully filmed. But England, until, well, let's be simplistic. England until maybe 100 years ago was primarily a white country, yet a lot of this film production is about England in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. How do you view the typecasting in those dramas? How would you organize the typecasting in those dramas?
That's a tricky one. I think because we've done classical stuff in uni, I just think you should just, at this point, we know the history. You know, I think with something like that, there are so many that have been made to the exact T of the history, to the point where they cross the T's and dot their I's to the exact, everything is truthful. But I think now, you know, since we have the truth, why not play with the truth a bit? Why not, especially if we're going to be creative and if we're thinking about acting, and you know, it's subjective, and it's personal, and it changes depending on the day. I think with things that are done already, I think we can now start having fun with it. And I remember having a conversation with my friend about Pretty Women. Is that not Little Women? Little Women, that's the one. The stories, and you know, I heard that it's like the modern version, and I went to see it and I was like, no, it's not. You know, if the modern version was that, it would have been probably done a little bit more, you know, in like current London, and you know, there would be, because you could do adopted sisters, you could play around with it, you know. If the modern world now, people adopt anyone, you know, so it's like, why not really play around with it? I think for me, when I think about stuff like that, I'm like, well, it's art, so have fun. And if you're gonna have fun, do it, like really do it, play around, you know, put different colors in it. Yeah, make it more enjoyable.
By the way, I'm not sure that many of these historical dramas, other than the choice of all white actors, are so historically accurate. I can't believe that the world in the 18th century was that clean. And
no,
exactly. I can't believe that the people were that beautifully articulate, even if they were English.
You know, I think one film that really does the job is Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist really shows you what was going on at the time. It was really dirty. It was all man for themselves, you know, like Fagin just was a bad character. The kids were just bad, but I think that's something that would be so much fun to revisit and redo, because you're getting loads of redos, aren't you? So it's like, why not redo the ones that were more accurate, like Oliver Twist? And then there's that question of, why do we keep redoing things? Why do we keep going back? Why not focus on the future? Why not tell stories that relate to us now, that deal with issues now, that are more truthful to what's going on right now? Because I would love to see a film that deals with mental health within Black men, white men, all men, Asian men. That's something that I haven't seen being done yet, you know, so things that actually anyone who goes in can relate and then walk away and be educated. And I think that's something for me that I want to move forward. Whatever it is I want to do, I want to make sure that people can relate to it, but also walk away educated. They've learned something. They've experienced someone else's reality that they may have never been given the chance to do. You get 2 hours. Make those 2 hours the best 2 hours of somebody's life. Like, do something amazing with it.
Are you writing a theater as well as acting in it?
No. I do come up with ideas, but like, you know, I'm not a writer. One day.
Sounds like you have some ideas that you could turn into script.
I have loads of ideas. I just need to find writers, give it to them, and be like, see you later.
Right.
See you.
You don't want to write it up. You want to conceive and come back and act in it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about writing because it would be also really good to tell stories from like how I really want to tell stories. So why not try it? I'll try. I'm trying. Oh, it's a
Let's
process.
change the topic completely for the moment because I want to ask you about a couple of bigger issues. Um, what is your view of Brexit?
Brexit. Okay.
And
This is a
you
tough.
don't have to know a lot. I just want to know what your personal view is.
This has been an ongoing issue. I did my research into Brexit, and I really have taken a look at what it really was and what it is. And I think there's been a lot of misinformation around it, and I think it's been articulated incorrectly. And I also think that there's also been some information that hasn't been fully expressed. The way that if they did it, people may change the way that they think about it. For me, you know, where we're at now, it's kind of it's one of those situations where you have to think, how can we make sure that whatever we're doing will benefit everybody, whether if it's Britain or the EU? How can we ensure that moving forward, because we can't go back. And I think if we spend too much time trying to go back, then we're going to probably miss out on so many things that can help us moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm more caught up on how can we ensure that whatever happens with us leaving benefits everybody. And I think I think the media and everyone that's involved in terms of trying to tell us about Brexit needs to do a better job in terms of also getting rid of fear, because I think there's a lot of fear for like young people thinking, oh, what we're going to do, like this is going to affect us and it's going to ruin us. And it's like, how can we also be told things that can soothe us? Because I think we get into so many informations that just fear us, but I think we also need information that can ensure that, okay, we're going to be okay moving forward. We can survive. We've done it before, we can do it again, but let's try and do it better. So I think with Brexit itself, there just needs to be more positives about it, because I think there's too many negatives around it. And sometimes when you focus on the negatives, you just kind of feel like, what's the point? And you know, my age group, it's a lot of fear in terms of like, it's going to affect us. And I don't want it. I don't want to move forward feeling like, oh, this is going to affect me negatively. I want to also know about the benefits. You know, I want to know what's going to come out of it that's going to help me, because I'm a really optimistic person. So I want to know the hope in it, the light in it that I can take from it, rather than just like the sadness and all the stuff that I'm going to miss from it, because that's not going to help me.
Liv, how have you read or heard of anything that's positive in the way it might impact people around you?
Um, no, I haven't. I have heard that with Brexit, the issue is that it's actually having an effect on our economy. So if we can get out of it, we'll be like, you know, our own place again, and then we can accumulate wealth again. And I think for me, if we can really do that, if that's something that can actually be achievable, then that's going to be great, you know. And if we can ensure that in terms of like how we trade with the rest of the world, or how we trade with Europe, is going to be kept, you know, positively, and in terms of how we also travel back and forth from European countries back to the UK. I think if that's going to be kept, then that's great, because I do want to go to Spain. I want to go to Italy. I do. So if I can go without feeling like I can't come back, it's going to be great.
I think once the COVID thing is under control, you're going to be able to travel to Italy and Spain.
Yes. Yeah. I'll be fine then.
So tell me about COVID, how you think it's been handled in Great Britain, how it's affecting you and your friends, and whether you object to any of what's going on, whether you think it should be handled differently.
In terms of how it's been handled, you know, I think New Zealand did a great job. I don't know what New Zealand's been doing, but we need to ask New Zealand. I've been saying this to everybody. What did New Zealand do that everybody else hasn't done? That's what I'm like, can we just have a conversation with New Zealand and be like, tell us your secrets, tell us what you've done. And I think that there's, you know, and you do look into the media, and you do research about sorry, when you do more research into COVID, you start to realize that some of the cases, you know, unfortunately people who may have had COVID and didn't die because of COVID are still being told that they died because of COVID. So it's like, what are the information that we've been told? Is it being articulated properly? Can we get more clarity on it? And I think moving forward, I don't know much about COVID in the sense of, I don't want it to continue causing fear. I want us, especially like with Manchester, it's a bit up in the air. Like we came out of lockdown and then now we're in lockdown, but are we in lockdown? So I think there needs to be more clarity in the sense of what's really going on, and if it's possible, make sure that like life can go back to normal, but not obviously, it's never going to go back to normal, but in a way that makes us feel safe, and in a way that isn't, controlling, or, like you can breathe. And especially young adults, we want our theaters back, especially the actors that I'm friends with. We want to go back to the theater. We want to create again. We want to do all these things again, but we are also very happy to ensure that we keep safety a priority. And I think that's one thing that I think people don't realize, that the young people are doing so well at keeping their social distancing. The young people that I know about are doing well, but the young people that don't do it, it's because there's too much confusion and there's too much kind of up in the air. So it's a sense of like, well, if you're locked down in and then stop lockdowning, then what's the point? If you lock down one moment and then you don't the next moment, it makes young people especially feel like it's kind of a trick. So what's the point? I might as well hang out with my friends. But if you really, articulate what's going on, and you keep to it, and you hold integrity as well, and you do what you say and you say what you do, then more young people will be more likely to also respect that. And I think that's the problem that young people have been having, that I've seen. It's that sense of, well, who really knows anyway? And I think if you could articulate that what you do know with the young people, I think you'll get a better response from us, because when we are given the chance, we are very responsible. We do have common sense, but you just need to give us the chance, and you need to be truthful with us. And I think that's something, especially with social media, that a lot of us have a hard time believing things or what people say, because then they turn around and do something else. So it's like, well, then if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it too, So, and I'm young as well. So you only live once, that type of situation. So yeah.
That was a good defense of young people.
I'm trying to help us. I'm trying to help the young people, because we look bad in the media, but we're really good.
Are there any other issues that you'd like to bring forward?
No, I think those are the main issues right now.
Well, then what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to go away, but I'm going to turn off the recording.
Okay.